Well, welcome everyone to the Bainbridge Island Senior Center Something to Talk About program. These programs are held Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on Zoom and are being recorded for those who would like to sit in on our YouTube page at a later date. The Something to Talk About programs are sponsored by Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island. Fieldstone offers memory care, independent living, assisted living, in addition to day stay and respite programs on the beautiful campus located in Rolling Bay. For more information, call 206-594-1010, and they can fill you in on that. We would also like to acknowledge that we are gathering on the ancestral homeland of the Suquamish people, the people of the clear salt water, who have lived on the water of the Salish Sea since time immemorial. We honor them and are grateful for their hospitality, OCM. And so today I want to welcome everybody who's participating here, but Ann Lovejoy, our beautiful Ann, is going to be here, and we're going to talk about Martin Luther King Day. So with that being said, I'll hand over the mic to Miss Ann.
Actually, Lena, I think we should start with reminding people who are watching this later that the Senior Center is going to be open as a warming center all through Monday and possibly longer depending on the weather. So if you're having issues, you can call IVC to get a ride and get brought to the Senior Center where you can stay nice and warm in case you lose power at home or you can't stay warm enough. So either way, we just want to make sure everybody is safe and warm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
Right?
Yes. Yes.
I want to welcome you, Akuyea Vargas, who you are so gracious to bring us up to speed about all the interesting things we might want to do. One of the things I feel like is really important is like changing the habit that we have of using the long weekends that are the federal holidays as playtime.
Yes.
And instead really think about them as a way to observe something. And it doesn't mean you have to spend the whole weekend studying necessarily, but it does mean that we should take some time and really kind of be respectful about how we're gonna use this time. One thing I like to do is service, because Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was all about service, all about nurturing the beloved community in various ways. So I think that would be something we can talk about after a bit. But I also really want to remind everybody that there's going to be some wonderful programs on Sunday at the Bainbridge Island Art Museum. Akuyea, do you want to talk a little bit about that and what the students have in mind and what's going on there?
Oh my gosh. So this weekend at the Bainbridge Island Museum of Arts, we will be commemorating, honoring, celebrating the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. We have community leaders coming in. We have from 12 to 5, a social justice social, all those that are doing the work in civil rights, human rights, social justice. There'll be tabling, there'll be fellowshipping, they'll be connecting, they'll be building those relationships, they'll be having some amazing conversations about justice and equity and race equity and what that looks like. We have Kids Up E-Race Coalition, Kids Up Surge, the Health District, the Senior Center. The list goes on and on and on. There's 30 people already tabling there. And then we've got workshops, we've got mimes, we've got poetry reading, skits, we have community engagement. And that's what we really have always wanted for our community celebration and commemoration, was how do we transform our communities and how do we connect and start building relationships. I remember over 15 years that Dr. Patrina Wright, Pat Wright, they call her Pat Trinell, Patrina, wherever she answered to, but for 15 years, we did Sing Out, which brought the community together. They were breaking bread, they were fellowshipping, they were learning how to work together learning how to sing together, and then learning together and really building and strengthening relationship. There were conversations, they were breaking down barriers and really building the unity within the community across the barriers. You had people coming across the bridge and people getting on the rock and people getting off the rock to be able to come and really connect and fellowship. And it was so amazing and so transformational. Hearts and minds were being changed. Hearts and minds were being pricked. People that never spoke to one another was speaking to one another, singing with one another, eating with one another, and doing all those amazing things that really, really are the foundational roots of how we transform the way we react and the way we relate to one another and the way we connect to one another and the way we build real healthy relationships across all of the barriers.
Oh, I wish we could do
Racial
that again, because I remember being in the Phil-Am Hall and
Yes.
having Rudy cook these
Yes.
amazing meals and make the special tea that he made, so our throats, the singer tea. And when we sang, that there would be 200 people maybe, and the whole place would vibrate, and you could feel it in your body, and it filled because the structure
Yes.
is wooden, and
Oh my
we're creatures of vibration, and that music was in our bones. It was so beautiful.
And I know, Sheila, you can talk about it too, because you were one of our administrators and facilitators and part of the team that helped us to really build the community to come in and participate with Sing Out.
It was beautiful. We need to resurrect that, get a different
Yeah.
kind of choir going, because
Yes.
that would be really beautiful. Barbara.
Well, last year, BEMA's celebration has stayed in my memory for this whole year. There were some performances, some readings, and that were accompanied by dance that were very moving. I mean, I was in tears, but I have to say one of the things that I remember as being super fun, and maybe this is a modern version of the choir you were talking about, was the karaoke going on in the big theater.
Yes.
And I felt like that was one of the most fun things I have ever been around. And it made me feel like, gosh, I hope I get invited to the next party.
Oh, you're coming. You're coming. We've got our soiree. That's the party for Black History Month. So, we just want to really create a welcoming environment where people feel belonging and connection. And that's what we are endeavoring and aspiring to do, here in our community. We want to do that.
And make it fun. I think sometimes people are like, oh, I don't want to go hear a depressing lecture. It's like, it's so not that at all. That's the beauty part, that if you're listening to this later, just block it off in your calendar right now that you're going to be at BEMA on Sunday afternoon, because one of as Barbara was just saying, it is most joyful, amazing. And partly because of the youth, when the students get their music going and their poetry and their dancing, you're just like, oh, this is the hope of the world. It's so beautiful.
Well, I have to echo everything Anne said about the Phil-Am Hall, etc., and at the high school as well, because we did it at the high school after that.
Yep.
And the one thing I remember is putting the Martin Luther King Jr. sign up for the road. Remember that?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that was so much fun. And every time I go by there, I think, yeah, I remember standing there with Derek and all you guys doing that. And it was such fun. But I think
talk about that, Sheila, because the students, it was our UBS students and our Living Life Leadership students, and those that begin to, what they did was there had never been a Martin Luther King road in our county. And so they said, we celebrate Martin Luther King every year, but we don't have anything in our county that signifies, that really honors and commemorate the service and the sacrifice. And so one of our students from our UBS, she said, we want to rename a street. And so they renamed that, right there off of High School Road, Martin Luther King Way. And Not only did they do that, they inspired Bremerton, because the Living Life Leadership students was like, how come Baybridge gets to have a Martin Luther King Road and we don't even have one in Bremerton? And so they went down to the city and to the mayor and to the council and said, we want a Martin Luther King Way. And it was a challenge for those young people, because they pushed back on those young people for 2 whole years.
Really?
Every street they wanted to name, they said no. They had to go doorbelling, knocking on people's door, getting signatures, saying, because they wanted to name Park Street Martin Luther King Park Way.
Right.
Beautiful, beautiful.
But they said, no, we're not going to give you Park. And so they fought with them for 2 years to be able, but they finally got 7, which was just a little strip of street, which was kind of disappointing, because, if you know the history there in Bremerton, the reason why they wanted to name the street Martin Luther King Parkway, they had Martin Luther King Dreamway, they had all kinds of different ways to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, they were coming up with ways to accommodate and make it happen, because the oldest African-American church in our county is on Park. In fact, Park used to be the African-American community before they gentrified it and moved it. The Evergreen to Park there off of Park Street was what they call the Black People's Park, because they would go from Ebenezer and they would go down to the water and baptize their congregants and those that wanted to be baptized. So it was deemed the Black People's Park. This was back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, that history. And then when Mr. Bremer wanted downtown, they gentrified, because the African-American community lived on 4th, 5th, 6th, Park, and Pacific down there, right down there. And they actually built a back gate to the shipyard, because the African community walked to work. They walked all the way down there. And even some of the most famous members of that community was Quincy Jones. They lived here. Yes, Quincy Jones lived in Bremerton prior to. When they gentrified, his parents were in the Sinclair Park, which was over what is now called the Auto Center Way. That was the entire African-American community. And then what they did was they ran the highway through the community and gentrified it again. And so that history, when you riding down the highway and you see Loxie Egan's Way, Loxie Egan was an African-American leader that was part of the NAACP that fought against them running that highway and removing the community. And there's only one footprint of our Black community that's still there, and that is Sinclair Baptist Church. They built everything around that church. And that is in Bremerton at the Auto Center Way. When you go there, look for that church. It's right behind it's right there, and you'll see it. It's just like, what is a church in the middle of all of these Auto Center Way? And if you know the history, then you would know that that is part of the footprints. And we're working even now to make sure that the history is not being erased. We're putting in heritage markers. We renamed the post office downtown. In fact, tonight, we are renaming the downtown Bremerton Library Dr. Martin Luther King Library at 6 o'clock. And yes, because what you need to understand about that history is what back in the 90s, that building was the Martin Luther King building. And then in 2005, when they did some remodeling, they took down the Martin Luther King sign, and then they started calling it the downtown Bremerton. And so we went to the city and we said, we would like our Martin Luther King library back. And so we took them all because it's in the city notes, we took them all the records, we took them everything, and they said yes. And tonight they're rededicating that building back to
Wow.
Dr. Martin.
Woo!
That is awesome.
Yeah.
You know, it's that persistence that really makes the difference. And you have been fighting this fight and working this work for so long, decades and decades, exploring the hidden history of our communities, calling it forth. I remember when somebody was saying, oh, there were never any Black people on Bainbridge Island. And you were like, well, then who are these people in these old pictures and old photographs from the 1800s? Who exactly are those people?
That's
right? Because,
That's
you know, we can erase things by ignoring them, but you've been such an archaeologist almost, or archaeological historian, really delving and looking at things that people, you know, like who knows who Loxie Egan's is? I mean, I do because of you, really. But it would be awesome to, maybe we should do some more programs like that. Like, who are these people that we're forgetting? We need to remember
Yes.
them.
Yes.
Is Loxie his real name, or is that a
That's his real name.
Loxie, huh? Wow.
Loxie. Loxie. Loxie.
Can't you do that again at our library? And because you brought that, and then you brought all those pictures.
Yes.
Stuff.
I would love to share it, because one of the things, I went back to school to get my degree as a cultural custodian, preserving the history and the heritage of Indigenous and African American footprints and contributions and culture for the state of Washington. I'm working with the state of Washington to make sure our region, Kitsap County region, that we have heritage markers put in, that we're commemorating, with that we making sure that the history is not being erased or lost. And we're trying to heal the history. We're trying to heal the land, and we're trying to heal the history. And we want to make sure that none of those contributions, none of their sacrifices and all the work that was done. Many of our African Americans migrated in the late 1800s, early 1900s to help build these shipyards and help build these lumber companies and everything. And it's like they just never existed, and they never, had any type of contributions to what this community has now become. And we just want to make sure that history is not being erased, and that it's being acknowledged and preserved. Because if we don't preserve it, we know that they'll be totally written out of the history books.
What contributions were made by Indigenous and African American together? Do you understand, Karen, what I asked?
What did you say, Sheila? Did I miss something?
Yeah, you did. You missed me.
No, I never miss you, Sheila, girl.
My question was, what combination of African American and Indigenous and Native American folks work together on what?
Well, I'm hoping, because a lot of the times, especially back in the 1800s when slavery was still in place, many of the African Americans that migrated here tried to go to Oregon, and they were turned around.
Right.
And we understand that many of the tribes took a lot of the African American community members that migrated here into their communities.
Mm-hmm.
And so we also want to celebrate Julia Jacobs.
I was going to say,
Julia Jacobs was
right?
an African American. The Chief Seattle and their community took that baby in. Her parents was on one of the ships that came here at Blakely in Eagle Harbor. And during childbirth, the mother died. And the father gave the baby to the tribe.
Right. And raised her like a princess,
And
kind of, right?
raised her as part, and she was instrumental in saving their culture, their basket weaving, their language. She was a huge part of that.
Right.
And so we understand that we have some ties, the African American community have ties to our indigenous communities, and those relationships and that history, we want to celebrate that as well. And we don't want that erased as well, because they were welcoming and they took us in.
And even today, I think there's a lot of solidarity. I was noticing, like, the other day at City Hall when Barbara Lawrence was receiving a proclamation,
Yes.
a lot of people from Bainbridge Black, from Kitsap Erase, from Kitsap Surge, people showed up to support that.
Yes.
And also for those of us who are there for the transfriending and the transgender proclamation, we get that support too. It's like the tribe and the Black communities really do pull together on so many important issues. And it's a good lesson to remember that, you know, it's about the community. It's
Yes.
about all of us.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you talked about pulling together, because, the tribe always, they always with Canoe Journey begin to pull together and unify the community and bring the community together to celebrate. And that's another way of breaking down those barriers, being welcoming. And they have welcomed us. We can remember back in 2009 when they were doing the canoe journeys, how they just welcomed us to be a part of all of that coming together and pulling together. And it was just transformative and amazing for our community to even come and be a part of that and be a part of serving the community as well, because we're talking about how we can serve. And one of the things that I think that I hope that we can impart and inspire our young people is to say to them, you can be great because you can serve. And that service and service learning is so rewarding and impactful and transformational that you can make the difference in your own family, in your own communities, and in your own environment where you can really change things.
And if you're part of that too, because I remember when they had the canoe journey, not this last one, but before, I was doing a Barbara thing. I was separating out the food from the plates and so on and so forth, and digging into the garbage. And we were down there for a couple of days doing that. And it was great fun. But I learned at the same time, I learned so much more about the tribe. And I learned, I was able to be there for the journey when the people came in their canoes. It's a two-way thing that happens when you do that. I'm not just there to serve, but I also have gotten so much from it. I will never forget that.
One thing that I love is that before the canoe journey, the tribe puts out an invitation every week for like 2 months to anybody who wants to come and help create the little gifts. There's like craft classes and programs, and anybody can come. And I feel like, and I've put that out to different craft groups and a knitting group, and had lots of people go and feel so welcome. And some people said, "Boy, I didn't know how welcome I would be." Well, the good news is, the tribe is historically extremely welcoming and very, very generous and really supportive of allies. And that's a lesson I think a lot of us could really stand to learn. Um, how do we support each other and remember that we are a community? That piece is huge. Karen, I wonder if you could say a little something about your Living Life Leadership group.
Well, back in 2003, we took students from all over Kitsap County, from Bainbridge Island, from Bremerton, Port Orchard, and, Silverdale. And we took them to National Youth Leadership, which is a national organization with leadership training, service learning, and social and cultural competency for young people. And they have, over the summer, they have summer trainings, and then during the year, they have conferences, and during spring break, they take them on service learning conferences around the nation. And in fact, around the globe, because they've taken 2 international trips. But we got involved. We are part of the Boys and Girls Club, and we took students with our Living Life Leadership and immersed them in what that was, the training to become young leaders, to give them voice, and to immerse them in service learning, which is immerse them in how to serve their communities. And then once they do the training over the summer, they come back and they have to do an initiative for a whole year on whatever initiative, whether it's they've done Youth Against Domestic Violence, they've gone Street Life, which was dealing with the homeless, they've done School to Prison Pipeline, they've done many different initiatives, and the achievement gap of students of color. So they determine, once they come back, they determine what they want to focus on a need in their community or in their county. And they work on that for an entire year. And so during that year, they present at the Human Rights Council, the youth council that they have. And so what they do is they have a piece that's called Taking It Back Home. So taking it back home means you have to go work on this initiative for the year, make the impact, and you have to report back to national what you worked on, whether it was advocacy with legislators, whether it was working with the health district or working within the schools. And so they have to really focus on, even with voting rights, they've done initiatives on voting rights that was called No Vote, No Voice, baby. And so they would get with their students and let them know the voting process and why it's important that while they're in high school, learning how to register prior to and what that all looked like, so that they can understand that their voices make a difference with national leaders within their communities, leaders with city councils, mayors, all of that. So we immerse them in that type of legislative understanding of what voting and the importance of voting, and your voice really counts as a voter, so that they understand that this is where they can make an impact. And so, it all depends on the initiative that they want to work on. This year, their initiative, they want to work on mental health and well-being with their peers, and they also want to work on gun violence, non-violence during this time. I think it's coming up for our kids, what that looks like, and they want to address some of the impact of drug and opioid use, fentanyl, one of those things. So they're working it out now, and they're connecting with the health district to work on some of those initiatives.
See, that's magnificent, because these kids are being taught how to be activists, but
Yes.
how to be grounded in actual practice.
Yes.
Because I think so many, a lot of the activist programs are kind of theoretical in a lot of ways. It's not just about showing up and holding a sign. I mean, that's important too, but
Yeah.
there's so much more to it. And this education piece and
Yes.
learning to educate others and interact with your peers and help them understand how they can be empowered, I think that is really huge.
Yeah.
Would you say you also have this thing you call artivism, which is like activism
Yes.
through art? Can you say
Yes.
a little about that?
Well, yes, artivism is huge with our young people because we want them to have a voice. And many of our young people gravitate to the arts, whether it's singing, whether it's dancing, whether they, doing performing arts, how do you begin to lift up your voice and have a voice and really through the arts, whether you're singing it or whether you're drawing it or whether you're communicating. We work with mime teams. We work with all of the different arts. We are part of Arts Ed Washington and hoping that we're working now with Inspire Washington to be able to immerse our young people in this type of activism, this type of having voice, and this type of making an impact and making a difference in their community. And I think that is wonderful. We have a display of some of their work that's going to be displayed this Sunday at the Martin Luther King at BEMA. And so we want them to be celebrating for stepping up and being brave. Like this morning, we were at the North Kitsap High School working with almost 1,000 kids, working and talking about the importance of service and what their voices are like. We had sessions and workshops on and they engaging in courageous conversations about, have they ever been driven by a dream? That was the prompt for them to have conversations with their peers, with their teachers. Everyone had to engage in the conversational sessions, and then they had to share. They began to express what service they were doing in their schools, in their community, working with disabled, working with, those that were in foster care. It was amazing to hear how engaged our young people are to serve others. And to me, that is transformational.
Oh, it so is, because I think every human has a need to feel needed or wanted
Yes.
or contributing. And,
Yes.
it gets lost sometimes because our culture doesn't always really, it features more ego stuff, and the service piece doesn't get promoted as much.
Yeah.
And yet, for so many philosophers will tell you, service is where it's at in terms of self-satisfaction and in terms of happiness, and so many things that are not filled by the Amazon truck showing up and dropping off a package.
Yeah.
It comes from, I think like every door should have a sign over it that says service entrance, right? That's every time you walk through a door, you're looking at a chance to be of service somewhere.
Yes.
And for kids to get that, not just like go do something important for somebody else, but like you who model it so beautifully. And then all this 1,000 kids who are going to go out and be
Yeah.
beacons, like shining lights in their communities. That is so huge and beautiful.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm very, very proud of the work that our young people have done with our community leaders, not just here, but nationally. Before he passed away, even with President Obama, before he was President Obama, and and President Clinton as well. So they've been immersed in leadership. And not only that, they do what they call immersions, which is experiential, hands-on learning how to serve. Not a textbook. They are immersed in, I remember when we took them to Tennessee and they had to map the homeless for a week. Oh, they were afraid to engage with, because it's frightening. They had to learn where they were getting their resources, where they were sheltering, who was providing services. They were immersed in the practice, and then they had to immerse in serving them, whether it was with gloves or clothing or feeding them. And so there's a different educational component when you talk about immersive experiential practices. It's like it's what I always say, it's hands-on, but it's also what we might call the words that they use. Okay, we're going to do an internship, but it's much more deeper than that.
Yeah, because it's heart work. It's not just,
Yes.
a lot of those programs that I've known about are kind of hierarchical. It's like, let me
Very
come and do
much.
good things for you, especially like white kids going into neighborhoods of people of color. That can just come off like, really? But when it is immersive, when it's really connecting to people's lives and they see each other as human beings, which you do when you talk to somebody over and over and you connect with them, you find out details about their life.
Yeah.
And that makes so much difference. So yeah, I love that. And you've been doing that for a long time, haven't you? Like years,
This would be, yeah, we started in 2003, so 2024 would be 21 years.
right?
And, I've tried to retire and step away from that. But the young people won't let me. They're like, no, we want to go this year. Are you not going to take us there? And so, every year I'm like, oh, okay, all right. But I'm ready for some of those young people that I've mentored over the years to just hand that baton over to them. And some of them I have, and some of them have failed forward but we support because that is experiential learning.
Sure.
And they learned that part of that process is doing reflection. What worked, what didn't work, what were some of the challenges, what was your struggle, where was your barriers, so that they can be successful. We don't just drop them in the water and go.
Right.
No, we nurture them back up so that they, because some of them, because our young people got passion. They were passionate about it, but then they saw that it is hard work, and that it takes sacrifice and it takes you being committed. And, with young people, they just want to experience everything. And that's good too, because then they're going to find out what they like, what they don't like, and what they're really passionate about. And so we like to immerse them in a lot of environments so that they can figure it out and kind of figure it out early.
Well, having that program go through the whole year too
Yes.
means that they get the idea of follow up and they get the idea of like being responsible for, accountable for what you're doing because you have to come back and make a report, right? And so you're learning all these steps.
Yeah.
And that is really powerful too. I mean, I can think of a lot of grown-ups who would not
Ah!
super well with that, right?
And we do have adult mentors that they have been challenged as they have gone through their mentor training of service learning. So yeah, we are all learning. We are all on that learning curve, and it doesn't matter what age you are, that we all come into that place of greater understanding. So that's how I feel.
Right. Yeah. And one thing that's always interesting to me is like people like feel like they have to go to Guatemala or something to do a service project, which is, that's great. But I feel like you don't even have to go very far. I mean, we know there are people sleeping in their cars on the island. We
That's
know there are
right.
people who are sleeping out in the waterfront park on the island. I've talked to some of them and they're like, oh, we're good. We have a bush. And just like, you have a bush.
Yeah.
What is that? But in it's 20 degrees, it's not good to just have a bush, right? It's like we can do outreach without having to reach very far. And I think that piece is also something to kind of nurture in ourselves and each other. Like, how do we be part of this community right here, as well as the greater community, right? Being willing to be vulnerable, I think, is part of it, to talk to people who might not um, be somebody you're usually very comfortable with and try to go person to person. Some of the feeding programs are great that way because eating is universal, right? Everybody got
Hey,
to eat.
hey,
We all
ladies,
like
we
food.
got a visitor here. One of our first students in 2003
Oh,
with Living Life Leadership and National Youth Leadership. I hope she wanna just talk a little bit about her
yeah.
experience. Hey, sit down there. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Aquila Benton. I'm Karen Vargas's Akuyea's daughter. Yeah, I went to NYLT years and years ago. I'm 37 now, so that was quite a long time ago. but it was really important for me to do that as a person of color in a Bainbridge High School where there's not a lot of us. We took a lot of people of color with us from our church. We took a couple students from school. It was really integrated when we got there, which was really important. And yeah, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how to create community when you don't necessarily feel that, because you're not connected to anybody when you get there. You don't know anyone. So there's
Right.
no reason for you. There's not an already established sense of community. You have to make it. And so that's what kind of we learned how to do in NYLT. That was the
And
most.
how does that live out in your life?
Huh?
How does that live out in your life now?
Well, right now I work at I'm kind of case managing an unhoused emergency shelter unit. And we just get people every day that I have to make a community or a home for people that are unstabilized every day. So that's how it plays out kind of in my life. I have to basically make a community out of people that are unhoused, that come from every which way, every walk of life. And those skills that I learned in NYLT do help me do that.
I bet, because that piece of like creating community can be tricky.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is, because we got my community specializes in unhoused people with HIV and AIDS. So I gotta figure out how to help unhoused people that are also dealing with grief and a lot of health issues and stuff, create kind of a stability or home in a community, even if it's just for the night. And that's really hard to do in a short amount of time. And immersion helped me with that, because we had to figure out how to create community in a short amount of time, basically kind of like a survival course with people that you don't know. And that's basically what I do every day with clients.
So it sounds like resilience is a pretty important attribute too, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So what keeps you nourished?
It's really hard. I'm not gonna sit here and say that it's easy. That's really difficult. I'm still finding my way about how to kind of fill my cup, because I'm pouring out so much. That's something I'm still trying to grapple and get my hands on. Coming home helps for me. Coming home helps. I don't have a lot of time to get home a lot, but when I feel myself like really running on E, I just book myself back home to be around my mom and my dad and my brother. Like I have to get I gotta touch home base, and then I can go back out there and fight, but I gotta go back home and touch home base just for a second. And I'll just turn my phone off. I'm not looking at work emails. I'm at home, just so I can refill my cup, so I can come back and do it 100% the next time.
Yeah. Boy, home base is really a strength, isn't it? I mean,
Oh yeah.
Piece,
That's what I'm doing right now. That's what I'm doing right now. That's what I'm doing right now.
Talk a little bit
and
about.
here you are trying to make a home base for people who have no home, and you're kind of being that base, right?
Right. And that's why I have to come back and touch home base, because I have to realize or remember what it feels like, so I can create that for them there. Because my home base is really strong. I thank God for that for me, because when I come home, it's always rooted in your love and solidarity, no matter where we're at in our specific way. Mom's got school, Tommy's got this. When we come together, there's always love, and there's a root here that I can always touch back down to. So that's what keeps me nourished right now.
Can you
Lena
talk
has
a bit about the other job that you had working with our young people, which was so important to you?
With our young people?
When you used to work at the
Eating disorder?
Yep.
Oh yeah, before that it was ERC. I worked with youth. I work with adults now, but they're very the same a lot of times. You see a lot of the same behaviors. It's crazy how a 75-year-old can become 12 real quick in certain situations. So
that is true.
Yeah. So before then I was working with kids with eating disorders at ERC, and that was really interesting to see too. And it was my same job basically. I was basically the overnight watchman for the kids, basically getting them into a routine where they could take care of themselves at night, to have dinner and stabilize after having dinner, which is really hard for kids with eating disorders. Because you have to sit with that food inside of you all night, and that's really hard for them to do. So
I think
that
we
was-
have a question
Uh-huh.
from Luna. Can she? make
Yeah,
it-
actually, I do. I'll lower my hand on the screen. One thing that came to mind, I have a 20-year-old son, so I have a lot of the younger, that generation in and out of our life a lot. In the work that you do, and you kind of answered part of my question, there's a vast age range that you work with.
Yeah.
What I'm finding specifically in the last 3 years, especially with the youth or younger people, is the lack of trust or even wanting to trust. And not even, I mean, it could go from Asians to natives, natives to blacks, blacks to whites, all of it. The key thing is the trust. So when you're trying to help somebody, that wall is like step one of trying to break through that. And even like my son too, and just talking about certain social situations, scenarios he might get into, whether it's a fun thing or a not so fun thing. It always breaks down to, I don't want to do it because I don't trust that person.
Right.
Like, okay, we need to break that through that piece first.
Yeah.
In your experience, in your line of work, how do you address that right at the beginning? Because it's right at the beginning.
Right. It's right at the beginning. And
Yeah.
And it changes from whatever environment I am in. Right now, I'm the distrust and the wall that's up against me and my clients right now is I'm housed and they're not. So they're wondering, how the heck is this person that doesn't know what it's like to be homeless going to come in here and tell me how to help me at where I'm at? They don't even know my life. That's what I deal with every day. And I, first of all, I just really and I don't even try to say I've done and I've been. I said, look, I don't have to have your same experience to be of service to you. And I make that really clear to people when I went right up front. I'm like, yo, and it was easier with the kids because I've been a kid before. And it was easier to touch back down to that 12 or 13-year-old that was trying to figure it out. But I've never been unhoused before. So that was tough for me. And I had to just really relay that message with, just because I don't have that experience, I'm still here to serve you. I'm still here to help you. Let's tell me about where the common ground is. Tell me about yourself, and let's talk about that. I'm sure we can figure out where our experiences are the same. Even though that unhoused piece I can't relate to, I can still be of service to you. Let's figure that out so that whatever it takes to make you more comfortable with me helping you. And I just want them to always know that I'm always here to help you. And in this economic state right now, I always tell them, none of us are that close from not being in house. Not me anyway. I'm like, it's just a disaster or two before I find myself in the same situation. So how different are we really? All it takes.
Yeah, that's more true than ever.
Is a couple real bad life changes for us to see ourselves in the same room dealing with the same things.
True. Yeah, and I think a lot of people are feeling that edge.
Yeah. Especially right now.
Home park.
Right now,
right?
I've seen people. They've been during this pandemic, during this time. Now they're finding themselves looking at homelessness. And so we're not really that different from each other when you look at it like that. So that's kind of how I work myself around it. And I'm still working on that unhoused piece, because that's the part I can't relate to. I've been blessed enough to never been unhoused. I've been a kid before, so that was easier for me to relate, because I could make a joke about puberty and how that works, because I've been through it. But that unhoused piece, I'm still learning about that, because I've never been unhoused, just by the grace of God.
But being open to learn, that's a huge gift, right?
Oh yeah. And take me there. We go and we go through their belongings and figure out what, how they want to do it, because also they've already created a sense of normalcy for themselves. And I never want to be come in and change that rapidly because out of the need to help them. Because it's off-putting to them. They will shut down on me. If I come in and start trying to reorganize their life because this is what you need from me, I need you to do this because this is the way that you're going to get the help. That's not, I can't do that. I've learned that that's not the way. They'll shut down, they'll leave program. I won't see them for a couple of days, which means they're not getting their HIV meds. They're not following program protocol. So they're not getting any assistance because they've tuned out. They're tuned out because I've tried to change their life and that's not what they want. They want me to meet them where they are, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's my experience.
Well, thank you for sharing it with
Thank
us.
you.
That's
Of
very
course,
moving.
of course. I'm at home with mom. Let mom come on in and take over. So what's mom?
Yeah, we gotta go.
Well then,
Okay.
come on, Mama. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. That's awesome.
Hi, Dee. Hi, Mama. Yeah, Grandma. Come on. Let's go.
If you got to go, or are you good?
What do we have left?
I think we've covered a lot. I mean, if there's any one thing you would like to say about, like, how do we get involved? Maybe that, for some
I would
people, that's
love for
important.
everyone to just come and celebrate with us this Sunday at BEMA, kicking off at noon with the Social Justice Social. That's really our time to fellowship, connect, and meet and greet and have fun with one another. But our community celebration starts at 2:30 to 5. But I would love to just invite and welcome everyone to just come out and be with us and celebrate with us. And I did want to talk about the Living Arts Cultural Heritage project a little bit before I left. And that is the preservation of the history, heritage, and culture of the Indigenous African American communities here for our county and for this region. We're working with our state representatives. And so we're working with Olympic College, we're working with Evergreen College, we're working with our communities. We're working at the Evergreen on what we call the Remnant Project to make sure that all of the history is being digitized, is being cataloged, and we are making sure that none of it is being lost. We're making sure it's being preserved properly so that the next generation won't have to do what we're doing now.
Yeah. And finding a place to archive that, like,
Yes.
Who's going to hold it, right?
Right now, we're working with Evergreen Tacoma campus, where they are in the midst of creating curriculum and creating classes for community members to come in. We want to immerse it in community, and we want to make sure that they're taking all those oral histories. They're making sure that, because we know during COVID, we lost a lot of our elders, and a lot of that history is now lost to us.
Karen, are they using any of the people, the oral histories that they have at the museum up here, the historical museum?
I was hoping that we could partner with them. We have gone in the past to see if they would want to partner with us to make sure that it's being collected. I worked with Katie Curtis and the Bainbridge Island Museum of Arts to preserve the footprint of African Americans on Bainbridge. And so that's a part of that collection now to be digitized, but we are still unearthing so much of the history that has not been known to us. It's just like a floodgate has opened that, we're excavating, oh my God, look at the findings. And so we're excited about the Remnant Project. If you want to learn more, on Sunday, they'll have all the information, the QR code, everything. If you want to get involved and if you want to know more, they'll have up their informational board. So we're excited about that. Is something that I am so passionate and excited about is that we want to preserve this history so it is not lost.
Absolutely. Yeah, because that was the big thing that we did with the oral history at the museum, at the
That's
historical
right.
museum. I know Katie did a lot with that, and I remember doing quite a few different oral histories myself with people who are here. Are you doing it with the Filipino?
Yes, we
population
want
as well?
everyone involved because what we have learned as the underrepresented, underserved communities, there it's critical because it's their history that narrative is not valued and it hasn't been prioritized. And so we want to make sure that that happens as we connect with our state and the legislators have mandated that we preserve the Indigenous and African American BIPOC communities for the state of Washington. So we are lifting that up and hoping that everyone will begin to work in their communities to preserve their heritage and their history.
Mhm.
Lena.
I'd like to
anyone
add
give-
into that, as I'm looking at the clock, trying to stay within time as well, to tag on to what Karen was saying. The Anti-Gene at Corpus is,
Yes.
we just got an invite for the Indigenous oral stories that are going to be held at BEMA on February 24th at 3
That's right.
p.m.
That's right.
And they got several of my family members are going to be in on that interview thing. But it is to tell the stories.
It is to tell.
It is to tell. And I love that you brought that up. So thank you for mentioning that with our Independent community, Sheila, you as well, for bringing that up. So thank you.
No, you're welcome. And it will take, we work with, I don't know if you know some of the indigenous practices and traditions and the African American, but Sankofa, when we Sankofa and we Ubuntu, and when we begin to do that villaging of our voices and to begin to say, we can't, Sankofa says, we don't go forward. We have to go back and then bring our communities forward.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
We don't go forward. We don't just go forward.
Mhm.
The Sankofa bird is a bird that is able from Africa to turn its head all the way around, go get its offspring, tuck those eggs up under the feather, and move forward with they don't leave. So it's the premise of you don't leave nothing behind.
That's right.
What is that one? What's the bird?
Sankofa.
How do you spell that, please?
Sankofa. Sankofa.
Thank you. That's fascinating.
Yep. The only bird that's able to do that once it lays its eggs go with it. Yep.
Wow.
Yep. So I wanted to just leave that with you that, we also have what we call our WIAS. It is our responsibility. We have to be the ones to make the change. And it's going to have to take all of us as human beings to make a difference. None of us are exempt. We all have to work in a way that all human beings are being valued.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Karen. Thank you. Thank you all. This has been a wonderful discussion, and I'm getting a little emotional. It really touched. Thank you. Thank you. So, you guys, this was just so, I'm going to quote Anne's words that use a lot: rich, robust, fulfilling. There's all the warmth. Not only educational, but it's just a lot more heartfelt. This conversation was very heartfelt all across the table, and I thank you all for that because I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna walk away with this with a good heart. So anyway, we're gonna end this now. So thank you, everyone, and hopefully we can all join on Sunday and celebrate. And thank you all. You all are blessings to each of us. So thank you. Thank you.